I was in my second year at university when I first noticed him. We shared a general class, and by chance, I ended up sitting beside him one day. At first, his constant staring made me feel uneasy. I kept thinking, why does he keep looking at me? Why can't he focus on the lecture? It happened every time we were in the same room, to the point that I started dreading sitting near him. Finally, one day, I'd had enough. As soon as class ended, I grabbed my things and walked out quickly, hoping to get away. But as I made my way out, I saw him following me. Before I knew it, he was standing right in front of me, introducing himself with a friendly smile. He asked for my number, and I hesitated. I didn't know him at all, and wasn't comfortable sharing my number with a stranger. But he kept insisting, practically begging me to give him a chance. So, I said, if I see you again, maybe I'll give it to you. He agreed, smiling as if he'd already won. I walked away, thinking that was the end of it, especially since the semester was almost over. But just 2 days later, on my way back from the market, there he was again. I froze, wanting to hide, but he'd already spotted me. He walked over with that same smile, reminding me of my promise. I hesitated but reluctantly gave in, hoping he'd stop asking. That evening, he called, and we talked briefly. I told him I was busy, thinking I could put some distance between us. But as the days went by, he kept texting and calling me every morning and night. At first, it felt invasive, but gradually, I found myself looking forward to it. I hadn't dated anyone since starting university and was used to my quiet, independent life. But now, here was someone who seemed genuinely interested in me, and I couldn't help but be drawn in. Within a month, we began meeting in person, and by the following semester, we were officially dating. He had a charm that was hard to resist, and his attention made it easy for me to fall for him. His friends were wealthy, often inviting us out in their fancy cars. I found myself in a world of glamour. Looking back, maybe I should have questioned how they could afford such luxuries while in school. But at the time, I was caught up in the thrill. As the months passed, our relationship grew serious, or so I thought. It was the first semester of my third year when he confided in me. He can't pay his tuition. Concerned, I stayed late with him that evening, trying to think of ways to help. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I found myself genuinely worried about him. After some thought, I decided to cover his tuition and rent using my personal savings. The next day, I called to tell him, and he sounded relieved and grateful. When I suggested we go together to make the payments, he insisted I transfer the money to his account, saying he didn't want to inconvenience me. I trusted him completely and didn't think twice about it. It felt good to be able to help someone I cared about, and I believed it would bring us closer. But soon after, he mentioned that his mother was in the hospital and needed financial assistance. Without hesitation, I gave him more money. A couple of days later, he told me she needed surgery and that they needed even more funds. By then, I had spent almost all my savings, leaving only the money I'd set aside for my own tuition and rent. Yet, I couldn't bring myself to refuse him, so I handed over that money as well, telling myself I'd figure things out later. In the weeks that followed, I noticed he was becoming distant, but I didn't think too much of it. One weekend, while we were talking, he suggested that I scam my parents to help us get more money. His words hit me like a punch to the stomach. In that moment, I realized how foolish I'd been. My heart sank as I finally saw through his charm. Without a word, I left, knowing that was the end. I didn't want to go back to my room, so I went to a friend's nearby to clear my head. She knew little about my personal life, but this time, I told her everything. As I showed her his photo, her face changed. She recognized him. With a somber expression, she revealed that he'd just rented a nearby apartment for a new girl and had recently bought her a new phone and other gifts. My heart sank. I didn't want to believe it, so I stayed at her place, hoping it wasn't true. But a few hours later, I saw him arrive, smiling and hugging this other girl as she came out to greet him. In that moment, My heart shattered. I felt a deep sense of betrayal, like I'd been living a lie. I couldn't attend classes for weeks, lost in the hurt and confusion of it all. My mom eventually came to check on me, sensing that something was wrong. She found me in my room, barely holding myself together, and asked what was going on. I finally told her everything, unable to keep it inside any longer. To my surprise, she listened patiently, then smiled and said, "That's quite a story, my daughter. Let's focus on moving forward. I'll help with your tuition and rent, so don't worry about that. Just get back on track and focus on what matters, your future." Her words gave me the strength I needed to pick myself up. I had let myself be blinded by infatuation and lost sight of what truly mattered. My mom's support reminded me of who I was and what I was capable of. I vowed never to let anyone take advantage of me like that again. If you enjoyed this real-life story, please subscribe to our channel for more.